Hi everybody, looks like we've got our full group here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I was able to email you these PowerPoints, so if you wanted to follow along you can, or you can just follow my screen. So we might not have the chance to go in depth on all of them, but I want to make sure that I talk to you about most of them. If anybody has any technical difficulty, just let me know. I see that Vicky in Vienna is on the line. She's listening in, so if you want to just follow along with the slides, you can do that. So today we're going to be talking about creating your federal resume. This is me. It's 8 a.m. here, so I might not look like this right at this second, but that is actually me. So I teach with the Resume Place. I have a master's degree in public policy, and then I'm also a certified federal job search trainer, and I train the trainer. So I'll be with you guys out there talking to you about our CFGIST program. So the basic outline format that I'm going to be teaching you today is a standardized format that we have basically invented, and it has become extremely popular. Our format for federal resumes is so popular, in fact, that it's now what the Office of Personnel Management teaches. So the federal resume is basically the key element of your application. So people hate this when I talk to them at Georgetown or GW or Harvard. It's not where you went to school. It's not who you know. When it comes to competitive federal jobs, the resume is basically sometimes the only document that you'll ever hand in. It's extremely important. A federal resume isn't a private industry resume. Private industry resumes are typically these days about 2 pages long, sometimes 1 page. We see that even still. The typical federal resume is going to be 3 to 5 pages long. A federal resume is not a functional resume. We do see this format making a comeback for some reason. There's a lot of online resume mills or services, and those services tend to like these functional resumes, and I'll show you a couple examples of that. But for federal, we use strict chronological format. A big block resume. A lot of people still kind of use the format from olden times, 15, 20, well, more than that now, 20 years ago now, you used to be able to submit 171s. That was the federal form that you had to fill in. And so some people still have resumes that kind of look like those, but they're difficult to read. We don't submit just a bulleted resume. That's the short resume. I'll show you a couple examples of that with a lot of bullets. A federal resume has to be really targeted. And so the outline format is very successful for that. So if you ever receive a message like this, it's time to fix your federal resume. So this is a kind of a standard response that someone might get. One of our clients got this. It says, your resume did not document either the number of hours worked per week for all jobs listed, a detailed description of your duties performed, or the month and year worked for all jobs listed. So those are the basic compliance details, and we see a lot of people who are coming from private industry, even sometimes fed to fed, who don't include the essential things that are needed on their resume, like hours per week and a description of the job. Now, it does say in the announcement you have to include those things, but sometimes people don't know that. So what is a competitive federal resume? It's going to be 3 to 5 pages, like I mentioned. It matches the job announcement. It matches the job announcement. Now, that's true these days for private industry as well. It's just too competitive out there to not match the announcement. It also includes accomplishments. It lists employment in reverse chronological. It has all the information required in a federal resume, and it uses the outline format. Let me show you what that's about. Our outline format federal resume was created because USA Jobs, that's the online database we looked at last week, the resumes are read by human resources specialists. They're not read by computers. That's really important. Let me just say it one more time. Computers do not read federal resumes. There's like 1 or 2 very small exceptions to that rule, like some subcomponent of NASA, I think, still has an automated system. But by and large, all of the federal government has human beings reading your resume. People don't know that. It used to be that there was a system called Resumix, and a lot of DOD and other agencies used automated scanning technology, but that's not the case anymore. That was abolished. So now people are reading the resumes. That's why we use the outline format, because people are reading them, and we think that actually people are like little computers. So we have kind of a combo of using keywords, but a human touch. We developed the outline format in the first edition of the Federal Resume Guidebook, and it's now the preferred format for all HR specialists for readability. So HR typically sits in on our classes. They love this format. Let me show it to you. So this is somebody's job description. They worked for Coastal Development Services, and they worked from 2015 to present. You can see here we have the salary and the hours per week. Salary is not a required field, but we really recommend it. So here's the outline format. You see it's small paragraphs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, and they say pay administration, investigation, problem solving, education services, data, and then at the bottom, key accomplishments. Paragraphs, not bullets, and then we use those all cap keywords. You know how it is these days. We think that people just don't read, basically, that people are like computers since the internet, and since people aren't really reading books as much anymore. People are used to these kind of catchy 3 or 4 word phrases. So that's what we use here in our outline format, and I'll show you how to develop that. So what to include in the resume? We have the personal information, including veterans preference, work experience, education, any other qualifications. All of those things can add up to that 1 year of specialized experience. And there's detailed information about what's considered a compliance detail with that PDF there that you can link to. But I'll show you an easier way to find out what's required. So let's look at some before and after samples. This is a TSA resume. He's a lead screener. This is what we call the big block resume. So we mentioned here that it's unreadable. What else do you notice? So you guys can just type into the question box, what do you notice about the big block resume? What are some of its weaknesses from your perspective? Just looking at it just now, this is a big block. What are some of the weaknesses of the big block resume? And you can type in your answers to me. Okay, some answers are it's difficult to scan, it's exhausting to read, yes. There's no emphasis on importance or relevance. Fred, that's a great point, that there's nothing gets priority over anything else. You can't see accomplishments, says Carol, correct. I agree. There probably are some in there, but you'd have to read the whole thing. And Anne says she'd have to search for keywords. That's right. It's hard to pull out information that's relevant to the new job. Yep. It's hard to read between what's important and what's not. I think you guys really nailed it. The idea of having some things important, more important than others in the resume, I don't know why, but people don't think about how it comes across to other people. This is a tip. This is what I tell people. If you don't want to read your resume, neither does anyone else. I know that sounds crazy, but if you don't want to read it, neither does anyone else. Some people have an aversion to their own resume. You know, they hand it to me and it's like, they're like, here, and they try to get away from it as fast as they can. If you hate your resume, HR is going to hate it too. And it's amazing how many people submit resumes to jobs that they really, really hate. But it needs to be readable. It needs to be something that like a human being could just pick up and browse. So here's another before. This is a very common before that we see. It's a little bit different than the big block. What do you think about this one? This is what we call the bulleted list. So this might be like, we could call this a laundry list where people just list a bunch of stuff. What do you think are some of the weaknesses potentially of a bulleted resume? It still doesn't prioritize accomplishments. I agree, Nancy. We don't get to see those accomplishments. So it's very, very common in a job market like this that somebody, let's say that your whole agency gets shut down, the person who sits at the desk next to you, you guys both apply for the same job later. Totally can happen. People are competing with each other for the same jobs. If you both copy your job description to write your resume, then you're both going to have super generic resumes that don't show the difference between you. So the resumes that we try to create try to show who you are as an individual, in addition to showing those basic things that everybody is going to need to have in their resume. So it looks blah to me, says Anne. I agree. It's very blah. Something happens to my eyes and I just stop even looking. I just sort of see all those dots in a row. Too many bullets. Yep, it doesn't list accomplishments. Agree. I don't see a lot of numbers. That's a great point. There's not a lot of metrics or sort of details that stand out. Fred says, lost in bullet land. Yes. Yeah, it does seem to just disappear in front of your eyes, the resume. So one of the things about bullets that people always seem to believe is that when they put their resume in bullets, that they've organized it somehow. But just because it has bullets doesn't mean the resume is organized in terms of importance or priorities. So this is a very common format that we see from people. And basically, it's just like the big block, but with bullets, as you guys have noticed. So this is this is our outline format, and you can see here we have some all cap keywords, and we've taken those keywords out of the announcement. I'll show you where we found them. And the first keyword we have here is principal advisor, and then we have acting assistant federal security director. So sometimes people are put in an acting job. Probably he was applying for the job that he was acting in. So that's why we highlighted it in that way. So you guys tell me, what do you think about the outline format? Here's the first page of his resume, and then on the next slide, it continues. And we have here at the bottom, key accomplishments. What do you guys think about the outline format? What do you notice about it right away? What are some differences between the outline format and the big block or the bulleted list? It's more structured. Yes, I agree. Ines, it is more structured. It is more organized. Yep. It's easy to read. Yes, I agree. Very focused on showcasing what's relevant. Yep. It highlights the specific skill sets. That's right, it does. So we kind of took, a lot of people get really confused when they read announcements and they want to include all the words, which I can certainly understand. But what we try to do is drill down and maybe find a couple of key types of skills. So just as you mentioned, skill sets, that's right. That's what we try to find out. More white space, absolutely. That white space really is important. You can see here that because of the all cap keywords, you don't really have to read every single word in this resume. Yep, so Vicki says that. She says it's much easier to scan, even though it's just text. It's easier to ID what you need, says Fred. It highlights the important skills and accomplishments and then describes them clearly, says Kimberly. That's right. So what we basically did is we created buckets. So it's not, if somebody does hand you one of these bulleted resumes, it's not that hard to change it into an outline format resume. Basically, all you have to do is reorganize these bullets into buckets or these kind of key paragraphs. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 little paragraphs, and then key accomplishments. That's kind of a lot. We usually do 4 to 5, but this person, his most recent job was obviously the most important job that he had. Let's just take a look at his key accomplishment. During a championship tournament, which brought a large number of visitors and high-profile VIPs to the local county airport, I liaised with tournament planner concerning schedule in order to plan and alert screeners of heavy flight activities and equipment being carried on board. Resolved a major significant golf bag problem that required hand carrying due to late flight for a significant tournament deadline. Recognized for outstanding customer services by top golf pro in the country. That is such a funny little story, isn't it? For a TSA lead screener, having a story like that is really easy, actually. They probably got dozens of stories like that, because every day is something strange and different. There's always a challenge, right? Whether it's dealing with the elderly or children or golf bags or whatever. So sometimes in our work, one of the things that we do is we just say, what's one of the most difficult things that happened this year? Or people will allude to it with their accomplishments. They'll say, oh, that part of my job is just terrible. Oh, it's so hard. And that's where you say, why is it terrible? Why is it hard? And sure enough, you end up with a story like that. So we have a little story in here, and we do write it just this way. I'll show you the format that we use. And we do it because it helps that person stand out, and it proves their experience. So the federal resume process is about proving what you can do. It's not just listing it. You have to actually prove what's in the resume. So it's very legalistic in that way. So that's why we include accomplishments, and we'll talk more about that. Here's a before and after sample. This is a functional resume. So I mentioned that before. Are you guys seeing functional resumes? Are people coming to you with those? Let me show you what it is here. The person has separated the dates of their employment from the description of their duties and responsibilities. So at the top, it says computer network, hardware, communication, equipment specialist. And then at the bottom, it says Maryland Air National Guard. And then they were working on the USS Norfolk. So they separate those two things. Has anybody seen that in your work? Yeah. Okay. Vicki says she's seeing a lot of them. Yep. Okay, great. So this does not work for federal. And let me tell you why it doesn't work. For federal, this is just a rule. This is a rule. You can tell them it's a rule. Federal, the functional resume does not work, period, will not get you hired ever. Because dates and work experience have to be together. You have to anchor your job duties with dates. They have to be anchored. That's the word that we use, because it's a legal process. So they have to prove, remember that 1 year specialized experience we talked about last week? So HR is trying to find the 1 year specialized experience. That's literally what they're doing in your resume. They're trying to find it. And when you submit a functional resume, the experience is separated from the dates in such a way that they can't prove it legally that you had that experience for 1 year in that job, whatever. So that's why the functional resume technically does not work. We just wrote a big blog about it. It was a really popular blog because, boy, we're seeing them a lot. So this is how it needs to look, the outline format. You have the dates up at the top when you worked the job, the hours per week, and then beneath the duties, accomplishments, and related skills. So this is just a red line that you can draw with your clients or with your family or friends. They just simply cannot use a functional resume and expect to get a federal job. It's just really never going to work. So that's the bottom line. Great. So let's talk about how we create these outline format resumes. This is the strategy that we use. You can use it with your clients. You can use it with your own resumes. I'd like you guys to take a look at how many hats you wear at work. So in the job that I'm doing right now, let's say as an instructor for the Certified Federal Job Search Training Program, I wear 5 hats. I am an instructor. I'm a career counselor. I'm a technical expert in federal HR. I'm a writer, and I'm a team member. Those are all hats that I wear in this job. I could probably also add one more for information technology and using online learning tools. So those are 6 hats that I'm wearing in this job. Everybody wears multiple hats at work. I would like to hear from you. I want you to take a minute. I want you to share with me in the question box, what are the 5 to 7 hats that you wear in your job? You're probably doing client services. Maybe you're also teaching. Maybe you're also writing. Maybe you're doing some supervision of others, admin, data collection. What are the 5 to 7 hats that you wear in your job? And I'm going to give you a minute to type them into me. Okay, great. We have some good answers coming in here. Teaching, writing, research, networking, coaching, and learning. That's very good, Anna. I suspect that networking probably could be called marketing. Typically, our instructors do a lot of marketing to try and convince people to come to their classes. So networking might be marketing, or another word that we use for networking is liaison. So that's a very popular word right now, liaison, because that basically means that you are the link between where your office is and another office, whether it's another government agency or private industry or whatever. That's another word we use. Here's some hats from Carol: coaching, training, writing, editing, researching. Those are very good. From Rashi: coaching, relationship building, networking, client data management, and facilitation. Those are very good. Data management is a key one. I like, Rashi, that you included that because, and here you have written client data management. That's okay. Probably you're going to see something about managing the files and the data in a job announcement for a job like yours, because these days there are a fair amount of metrics, but also just personal information that you need to keep track of. Vicki has technical expert, great. Customer services, really good. Mentor, career counselor, writer, blogger, teacher, trainer, and life coach. That's a lot, but I like them. I think blogger is good. I think you could call it online marketing. It depends on what's in the announcement, but that stuff with the internet, social media stuff is very, very hot right now for jobs like yours. So I think it is great if you have a social media. You could probably make a hat called marketing and social media, and that would be a very good keyword. I also like mentor. That's a great one. You could call it coaching. You could probably just pick one of those. Technical expert is always relevant. You'd probably just want to include whatever words you have there in the announcement. So research, another research. Wow, this is a big part of your jobs. I see that. Client communication, psychologist, part psychologist, yeah, document development, and networking. So psychologist, if you are doing counseling, I mean, you could probably just call it counseling or urgent client services. I do think that a lot of times what you guys do is put out fires for folks, so you could probably call it that. This is great. So Annalie is only 1 month on the job, okay, but so far you've been doing career advisor, life coach, HR, networking, and relationship building. That's great. So once again, I would say marketing and instead of networking, and probably liaison would be a good word there too. Yeah, counseling or coach are both great words. Either way, the main thing is that we want to try and highlight the words that are in the announcement. Let me show you some hats here. This is a maintenance mechanic. Now, the folks who have the hardest time with hats, you guys did very, very well. You know that there are multiple components to your job. It's something that you could do really right off the bat. The folks who have the hardest time with this are people who have been in the military, or folks who have jobs that they can't think of what they do as multiple things. So here's a maintenance mechanic. So part of what he's doing is maintenance mechanic work. So we have maintenance mechanic as the first hat, then preventative maintenance, communications and teamwork, safety. A lot of stuff with mechanics is about following safety rules, and sanitation, another key word that we see in federal announcements. Equipment skills, small tools, that's a common keyword, and problem solving. So we have a combination of words here. Some of them are hard skills and some of them are soft skills. Let's take a look at what this looks like in the resume. So we have maintenance mechanic as the top one, and then preventative maintenance, communications, collaboration, equipment skills, small tools, and problem solving. So this is we have been working with a lot of maintenance mechanics at Smithsonian. We're training all of the individuals who work in maintenance for the Smithsonian museums. And this is a huge challenge for them to try and think about the different aspects of their work. But once they get going, it's much easier. A management and program analyst. So this is a really common job title. We saw this last week when we were looking at announcements. And so here's some sample hats. You can use these if you want. Program and management analyst. So you see right away, we're using the job title as a hat. It's amazing how many people apply for jobs as a supervisor, but don't use supervisor as a hat. So we incorporate those words inside the body of the resume. Then we have resource manager and quality assurance, mobilization processing site manager, budget management, travel budget manager, contract officer representative. Last sample here, ecologist. An ecologist who is interdisciplinary is a project manager. Scientists and folks who do work like that, where they're doing complex research, they don't think about their research as projects, but that's essentially what it is. So we changed that to project manager, where most people would just write research probably. Contracting officer, supervisor, safety officer, and liaison. A lot of science is safety at the federal level. So we're using our keywords to match the announcement. So that's a big part of how you're deciding which hats to highlight, is what's in the announcement. So if you have a hat in your current job, which is about counseling or technology or something, and is not relevant to the next job, you want to leave it off. So that's pretty easy, right? So here's a little tip. You want to make the job that you have now sound like the job that you want. You want to make the job that you have sound like the job that you want. So if there are components to your job that aren't relevant to the next job, you can just leave it off your resume. So here's a question from Vicki. How often do you reuse the keywords from the job or vacancy description as the bulleted title? So, we reuse. We don't want to hit them over the head, like make it sound like we're maniacs and use the word over and over again. But probably if there is a keyword, we try to use it twice. If there's the all cap headlines, we would try to use it again. For sure, we use keywords in the all cap headlines. Let me show you how we find that. So we're going to find the keywords in the announcement. We actually already did this last week. You guys remember when we were looking at announcements. You can see here the way that we find keywords and determine what's most important is for sure we're looking at what the job title is. So the job here is to serve as senior level emergency management specialist. Right off the bat, emergency management has to be one of our keywords. It sounds so obvious, right? When somebody just teaches you that, but that's one of our keywords. Then the next one, it says Readiness and Contingency Operations Division. So the name of the division is important. Now, some people aren't going to be able to hit those keywords, but in a perfect world, you would. So if it says Middle East and North Africa, research area studies, you want to make sure that you have Middle East and North Africa in your resume. So provides technical staff advice, assistance, and planning, coordination, acquisition, and maintenance. So we took only technical staff advice from that because the word assistance is kind of light. It's probably not as important. And then the next key part of this job is that they manage the operational readiness and they also look over the communication systems. So it's definitely like an imprecise science to figure out what's most important, but a big part of it for you is reading announcements for your clients and asking yourself, what are the hats that the person will wear in this job? So for me, it's very, very important to do that, to read the announcement. And then as I'm reading the announcement, try to picture that person in their job, like literally imagine them going to work in the morning and asking myself this really simple question: what does this person actually do for a living? It's so hard with these federal announcements. Sometimes you're like, you get lost in all the jargon and the words, and you miss the point, which is what does the person actually do for a living? So here again, in the rest of the announcement, we see some things here where it says experience required. So you could look at the qualifications section to get keywords. You don't necessarily have to look at the duties. If you want to have your resume as broad as possible, look at the experience required, because generally the experience required, remember I said last week, the 1-year specialized experience is that red line for HR. That is the legal words that they're looking for. So if the 1-year specialized experience is written well, hopefully you're going to see it repeat in the duties. Hopefully it will all be the same. You never know, but in a perfect world it would be. So right here it says experience engaging federal, state, local, and non-governmental partners which support the development of evacuation plans, strategies, policies, and procedures in time of disaster, preparing analysis of data, budgets, and contracts, interpreting complex policy, and preparing reports that outline complex guidance for the purpose of creating instructions, prepare recommendations, guidance, written and oral summaries for senior level briefings. So one of these words that you see a couple times is complex. We see the word complex a lot for analysts at a certain level, usually like a GS-12 and above. We like to include that. I mean, if I imagine what this person does is they basically are an analyst of plans. They probably sit in a lot of meetings as well where they're talking with partners. So it's good to put that partners thing right up top. A lot of analysis of data because they're trying to figure out what procedures are best and really doing like some analysis around that. Creating instructions for evacuations. It would be really hard, I think, to do this job if you had never worked on an evacuation plan before. That's just my gut feeling. So here's some knowledge, skills, and abilities. So that's a whole other part of the announcement. This announcement is, has multiple parts. You can look for keywords in this part too. Here it says knowledge of emergency management operations, ability to develop emergency operations plans, ability to communicate, and operate in an emergency operations center. So any of these keywords or phrases would work to hit the knowledge, skills, and abilities. So this is what we have come up with. After listing all of these things, we can sort of see that they fit into 5 buckets: emergency management operations, developing plans, communicating, analyzing data, and then we have accomplishments. So what we would do then is take all of those little words and phrases and try to incorporate them in. So basically what I'm telling you is you want your resume to look like the job announcement, but if it is word for word, they will throw it out. So HR has told us that if your resume is just copied and pasted, which people do, if it's copied and pasted from the job announcement, they have permission to just throw it away. And say this person's a cheater or weirdo or something. They cut and pasted the whole thing. But what we do instead is we kind of massage those words into our resume. So this is, I was teaching a class years ago with a bunch of engineers down in Kentucky, and one of the guys says, "Oh, I get it." He says, "This isn't writing. This is word engineering." That's right. You nailed it. It's word engineering. We're not really writing. This is not a creative writing exercise. This is technical writing. So you just try and read the announcement and figure out what's most pertinent. And the way that we do that is just seeing what repeats, what are the key things that are essential to do the job, asking ourselves those really simple questions like, what does this person actually do for a living? Which sometimes is mind-bogglingly difficult to figure out, right? So here we can also, after we've worked on those hats, we can also look at the questionnaire. So those questionnaires are the part of the announcement that are added on to the end. So you sometimes have to fill out a questionnaire. Why don't I ask you guys, give you a chance to tell me about your experiences. Has anybody tried to submit an assessment questionnaire? Have you tried that with your clients? And what has been your experience with them? What can you tell me about your experience with questionnaires? It's a USA job quiz that's on the back of an announcement. It's usually required to apply for the job. Can anybody tell me about your experiences with questionnaires? Okay, so maybe this will be new to you. So let's talk about the questionnaire. the questionnaire is a quiz. It's part of applying for that federal job. And it asks you basically to assess yourself and your skills. If you don't score at least an 85%, and in most agencies, a 90 to 95% score on this quiz, no human being will ever look at your resume. This is the first loop, okay? This is one of those things that if you don't score yourself high enough on the questionnaire, they will throw your resume in the trash. Basically, what they're trying to do is get people out of the system. They're trying to have less resumes because they're frustrated that they're looking at too many resumes because of the way the job market is. They're getting hundreds of applications for every job. So they created this assessment questionnaire to weed people out. If you don't score at least an E or 85% for most of these answers, then there's no point in applying to the job because no human being will ever read your resume. They only look at resumes that score 85% or above, okay? So let's look at this questionnaire. So this is a very common thing. It would say, for each task in the following group, choose the statement from the list below that best describes your experience and or training. So the first one is A, I haven't had education, training, or experience. B, I have had education but haven't done it on the job. C, I've done this on the job, but I was closely supervised to ensure compliance. D, I've performed this task as a regular part of my job. I performed it independently and normally without review by a supervisor or senior employee. And then E is the final one, and it says, I am considered an expert in performing this task. I have supervised performance of this task, or am normally the person who is consulted by other workers to assist them in doing this task because of my expertise. So E. Okay, E is the best answer. Just imagine that by each of these, A is 1, B is 2, E is worth 5 points, or whatever it is in your quiz, it's worth the most points. There are 3 ways to be an E. You can be an expert, you can have supervised it, you can be a consultant, so you don't even have to be a supervisor. You can consult people and assist others in doing this task. So those are the 3 ways to be an E. So this is an example of what they might ask. They might ask you if you've applied statutory and regulatory requirements, including the National Disaster Recovery Framework. So they're going to ask you about laws and policies. They might ask you if you've done preparedness exercises. They might ask you if you've worked in an emergency operations center. You see these are repeating from the rest of the announcement, so hopefully there should be no surprises. Do you know the rules and regulations related to national disaster and national preparedness? So let's take a look again. You have to know the DOD, FEMA, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers rules and regulations related to natural disaster and national preparedness. So what happens here is that folks who ought to rate themselves E are modest. And it is usually the people who ought to be E who are most likely to rate themselves D. Oh, I've done this. I did it independently and without review. And people are hesitant to say that they're an expert because they don't want to say that they don't want to imply that they're the world's leading expert. But that's not what it's asking. They're asking if you're an expert at your level in your field. So we want folks to give themselves as much credit as possible and not to be shy in terms of saying E. That is the best answer in this case. Okay. So the last question that they'll ask you is, do you verify that all of this is true? And then it says, I accept that if my supporting documentation doesn't support one or more of my responses, they can grade me lower. So what HR can do is go back and say, oh, this person was full of it. They never did that. If they read your resume and they don't see any of those things, now we would be in a really good position because actually most of these words are similar to what we had in our keywords. One thing that we didn't have was the names of the laws. I would probably make sure that those are in the resume, like Public Law 8499. So you see you can find some more keywords in here because they are going to go back to that resume and verify. So let's see if there's any questions here. I've been asked if the applicant must always put the best answer and what to do if they don't have any experience in that question. Well, that is a great question, Carol. What do you do if you have never performed an evaluation or maintenance? if it's one question out of 10, maybe you could still apply. But if it's 2 questions out of 10, I don't think that you could still apply and expect to get the job, because the line is really 85 to 90% is what you have to score. I really encourage people to just do a little bit of digging and research to figure out if they've done it anywhere at all in their career. And then also, sometimes the way that these questionnaires are written, I truly believe is unethical and unfair. Like, sometimes it will ask about a computer system that there is literally no way that you could ever know how to use unless you worked at NSA or unless you worked at the Geospatial Intelligence Agency, because that's their system. So they're asking people for jobs that are like GS7, entry-level jobs, and they're asking if you know about stuff that is totally out there. Sometimes the way that these questionnaires are written, and they're written by HR, they can take the questions from like a database, or they can make them up themselves. Sometimes I think they're written wrong. And so I would say, you know what, the way that this questionnaire is written, find a parallel. So that's my advice. If you see something like that, like a particular law or a particular technology, and then put in your resume that I know how to use Microsoft PowerPoint, which is similar to the NSA system, and then name the NSA system so that you have that keyword in your resume, so it's there. Because sometimes I think a parallel is the best you can do. Or you might say, instead of the National Response Framework, you might say, I'm familiar with the International Response Framework, which is based on the National Response Framework, something like that. So you can kind of reach for it. But if you're working with a client and you see that there's a couple of questions that they can't hit, and you think it's going to negatively impact their score, then they really just shouldn't apply, because that quiz is the first barrier to even getting your resume looked at. Yeah, so use a parallel. That's right, exactly. Try and use a parallel. So here's some keyword examples. Law enforcement. Law enforcement guys have the toughest job coming up with their keywords. You say, well, I'm a cop. Well, I'm a teacher. And that's what their resumes look like too. Like, they expect you to just know what all the components of teaching are, what all the components of law enforcement are. So here's a law enforcement specialist: technical operations, electronic surveillance, expert in use, installation, and operation of electronic surveillance, investigate potential hazards and implement electronic countermeasures, conduct technical investigations, gather intelligence and evidence, oral and written communication. Those are all keywords. Program analyst, acting mobilization program specialist, program management, personnel management, operations management. So you see here, we see program and management again and again. So you can repeat some of those keywords. I think there was a question about that earlier. You can repeat again some of the keywords in the outline format itself. So the final part of looking at how we create that outline format. So I think we've looked at the keywords. We've looked at looking at the questionnaire to get a little deeper into the keywords, and making sure that your resume really reflects that announcement. It's not a cut and paste. It's more of a mirror, a wavy mirror. So just to make sure it reflects. So the next part is the accomplishments. The reason that we do the outline format, the reason that we mirror the keywords, is because human resources, remember I told you this last week, human resources reads your resume. They have 2 screens. On one screen, they have the list of things that are required for the job, and on the other screen, they have your resume. That's how they're looking at resumes in human resources most often. So they're just kind of going with their eyes from one screen to the other. And that's why we make the resume look as close to the announcement as we can without being a copy job. We try to make it very close, because HR doesn't know anything about what you do for a living. Human resources specialists don't know anything about law enforcement. They really don't. They might be a human resources specialist that oversees the hiring of 24 job titles. They can't possibly be an expert in everything. So what they do is they look at that announcement, or they look at the list that they've made with their manager to figure out what are the key things about law enforcement. So that's why one of the things that we do is copy the words that are in the announcement precisely, because if you say that you are really good at devising and developing surveillance or monitoring equipment, let's say devising and developing monitoring equipment plans. They don't necessarily know that monitoring equipment in that sense might be the same as electronic surveillance. So for you, monitoring equipment and electronic surveillance are the same thing. But for HR, they have to see the words that are in the announcement, because they can't infer things, especially as you get higher up in the GS levels. They're going to be a little bit out of their realm when it comes to the technical aspects of your job. So you really want to make it as clear as you can. So that's HR. Now, it's a little bit different because HR is reading, grading, ranking your resume. But then they give the list of the most qualified people to the managers to make the actual hiring decisions. So the person who's really going to be your supervisor is the one who's going to make the decision. Those people read resumes in a different way. They're a different audience. See, there's two audiences for your resume. One is HR and one is the manager. So the next part that we want to do is appeal to the manager, and that's where the accomplishment stories come in. So the biggest question here is, how have you made a difference to your organization in the last 5 years? Accomplishments are the best way to show how you stand out above the crowd. So it's very, very common to have 2 resumes, 3 resumes, even 100 resumes for a job that are basically identical to each other. I mean, you can't believe it. We had a job announcement down on the National Mall for a park service like ranger. Great job. Everybody wants that job, work on the National Mall. Piece of cake job, because you get to live in DC, but you're working for the parks. Excellent job. They had 1,500 applications for that job, and of those 1,500 applications, probably 20% of them were qualified. So then how are you showing who you are in a job market that crowded? Now we're seeing the job market come up a little bit. It's not as bad as it once was, but still so many resumes. So I want you to try this. I'm going to give you a minute to work on it, to write a little bit. I want you to tell me about something that you did, something you accomplished in the last 5 years. That's fine. Keep it fairly recent. That makes you proud, something that you contributed to your work. So this is not a personal accomplishment. So not necessarily like a master's degree or something like that, but more something that that had an impact on your organization. So if it is something like a degree that you received, let me hear about how it contributed to your organization's mission. So let me give you a minute, and then I'll have you just type, just you can tell me like in 1 sentence or 2 sentences, something that you did at work in the last 5 years that you're proud of. Okay, great. We have some accomplishment stories coming in. If you want to tell me what your accomplishment is, you can just type it into the question box. This is a nice story from Angela. Developed a comprehensive field guide for new arrivals, which helped with orientation on arrival. That's a great accomplishment. One of the things that I like about that story is that it wasn't, it was something that was clearly missing from where you were working, and so you decided to create it. Angela, maybe you can tell me, why did you decide to create the field guide for new arrivals? Why did you decide to do that? You can type in your answer if you like. Here's an accomplishment from Ines, reached 86% year over year. Is that what that is? Premium services revenue growth in emerging markets. Great. Helped expand services delivery. Okay. So yeah, if you're expanding services delivery, then I would probably want to hear about what those services are. Anne's accomplishment is increase the percent of family members using your GEI services from 49 to 57%. Great. Love that kind of metric. It's really perfect. One thing that you could probably add in there, Anne, is how you did that. So you could just, it could just be like a little bit longer. You could say by marketing or by increasing the types of services that appeal to them or whatever. Here's an accomplishment from Carol. Institutionalized a virtual model of working with clients. Great. And using webinar training to help reach previously underserviced clients. Great. Helped expand the model of regional advisors through experience and suggestion. Well, that's good. The virtual clients is really great. We love that because so much of the world now is virtual and online. So that's a really good accomplishment. Rashi's is assisting family members who haven't worked in more than 10 to 15 years. Great, enter the workforce. There have been 4 such cases. That's great, Rashi. Well, you might talk about one of them in particular. You might just, as the final part of that story, what you've written is good. So you might say, for example, I wrote the resume or consulted with a stay-at-home mom who was discouraged, and we found her a job for $60,000 a year. Something like that, just like one real detail. So Angela has an answer for us about why she decided to create the orientation guide, and it says, it was part of my results agreement, but I want to step further, ensuring that all the information that is necessary for a successful orientation was included. Good. So you're saying that it was really part of your results agreement. It was already in there. That's okay. I guess then the question is, what was most difficult about it? What was most difficult about creating the orientation guide? And it sounds like part of the most difficult aspect of it was coming up with the information that was necessary in it. So that's the next question that we want to ask, because we want to make sure that you're telling your best accomplishments. So I just asked for any accomplishment of the last 5 years, but if you've come up with a number of accomplishments, then you want to make sure that you're always sharing the best one. So the way that Anne says that she promoted and got more people involved with getting services is by word of mouth and customer satisfaction. Well, that's great. Okay, so let's take a look here at the method that we use. So we have a tool that you can use. There's a link right here. There's a link right there to our CCAR builder, and it's free. It's an online accomplishment writing tool if you want to use it, and it will show it to you when we spend some more time together, but it's a really cool tool. So let's look at some examples of accomplishments. Right here is an accomplishment for a management and program analyst. And it says, develop and led process and efficiency improvements and cost-saving measures that reduce contracts and manpower costs across the enterprise. Provide a mission-critical quantitative and qualitative skills to support decision-making at the highest levels of the Navy, including the initiation of an 8% budget cut. Well, that's Navy right now, right? Lots of cuts. Provide a guidance to all regions for more stringent enforcement of entitlement travel expenditures. Oh boy, that's government, huh? Boy, we just start cutting down. It's all about the conferences. It's all about the travel, right? Cut the budget from 5.4 to 4.1 million. Identified fund items such as labor and critical contracts replace personnel. So all of this accomplishment is about cutting cutting people off of the money, getting things streamlined. So these are great accomplishments for somebody who's going to be entering a job where they're going to have to cut a bunch of stuff. Here's a Director of Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. Accomplishments include streamline the staff onboarding process, resulting in an increase of over 85 new staff members stationed in 4 offices, promoted 3 times in 3 years to become the first female and first civilian in the history of the organization to lead the Camp Pendleton offices. Yeah, I'd imagine that's not a common job for women. Revolutionized the workforce training and development for the region by launching the organization's first annual training week. Selected to serve as one of the organization's primary field media liaison. So those accomplishments are kind of a mix. There's not just one story. There's a couple of different stories in there, but primarily revolve around her uniqueness in that position. The format that we recommend is called CCAR. So somebody mentioned STAR. Vicky mentioned STAR. That's another format that people often use. CCAR is the one that the Office of Personnel Management recommends that you use for writing your accomplishments. Accomplishments are a required part of the federal resume. I know, they're required. They're not going to say it anywhere because the way that they write these things is obtuse and bureaucratic and weird. But basically, it's implied in a number of different ways in the job announcements that you have to have accomplishments, because the whole thing about your resume is that it is a legal document. I'll say it again. It's a legal document. It has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you're the right person for the job. Sometimes you won't even be interviewed for the job. They will hire you off your resume. They're legally allowed to do that. That's fine. They can do whatever they want. They hire people without interviewing them all the time. But that means that your resume has to speak for you. So we use this format. It's called context, challenge, action, and result. And this is also the format that they recommend for the interview. If you do have an interview, same format, context, challenge, action, result. Let's look at it. CCAR. Sometimes some agencies mix this context and challenge. You might see it written in the opposite way, like challenge, context. It doesn't matter. They're basically similar. The context is, what was your job title? So you would say in 2014, while working for the State Department in Istanbul, Turkey, I led a project to whatever. The challenge. So what was the specific problem that you faced that needed resolution? So that's kind of what I was pointing to in asking for a few details from Angela about creating the orientation guide. What was the problem? The problem we faced, so you might say the challenge was that new families were coming to our base or our offices and were frequently lost, or they shared with us that they were stressed because they couldn't find basic things that they needed, like how to get electricity right in their apartment, or where to buy water, or whatever it is. So you want to really articulate the challenge. And then the action. What did you do? So I researched all the different services that they might need, and I found the most current phone numbers, email addresses, and contact information, and I put it in one booklet. And then the result. As a result, the families that come to our station are much more comfortable. The families report that they're happier, whatever. So all of those components there, it's actually pretty intuitive. It's not like something groundbreaking, like earth-shattering, the CCAR format, but it does really prompt you. Context is who, what, where. The challenge is what was hard about it. The action are the specific things that you did, so like the verbs, research, writing, whatever it is, talking, and then the results is what difference did you make. So Rashi had the example of finding somebody a job or assisting family members who haven't worked in more than 10 to 15 years. So you might just add at the end of that, were you able to get those people jobs? What did that do, for your organization to be able to get family members back into the workforce? The way that we one of the reasons that we include our accomplishments is to try and highlight some core competencies. So just based on Rashi's quick story here, he assisted family members who haven't worked in more than 10 or 15 years to enter the workforce. You tell me, okay, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think are some of the soft skills that were necessary to do that, to accomplish that? So let's think about personal qualities, traits, characteristics. So what is it? What do we know about Rashi based on that story, that he was helping individuals who have been out of the workforce for a long time? What is he good at? What's he good at? What are his skills? You tell me. What do you think? We don't even know much about it. That's all we know, is that we're helping some folks who've been out of it a long time get back into it. What do we know about him? What's he good at? Passionate. Absolutely. I think that passionate about helping. I think that comes across right away. That's going to be a difficult case. Everybody hears that in the numbers. Because you included the numbers, we know that you're going to be somebody who's passionate about helping. Adaptability is something Ann says. Yes, I agree, because you're taking your own skills and qualities and you're applying them to somebody who's an unusual case, right? That's an exceptional case. It's not a normal thing. Communicating, says NS, absolutely. If you're going to help somebody who's been out of the workforce, you probably need to explain a lot of things about what's changed. So communication. Excellent at identifying skills, Nancy says. Definitely. I mean, if you would have to really talk to that person and figure out what they're good at to help them get back into the she is good at understanding the core elements of the problem. Yeah. So she's talking to people and figuring out, like, what are the things about them that are transferable. So even if a person was, let's say, caring for an elderly family member, that's a very common reason that people jump out of the workforce for a period of time. They're caring for their mom or their dad or somebody who's sick. So if we know that they're doing that, then we might learn, well, this person is patient or whatever. So that's something that Fred points out, that she's able to understand the core elements of the problem. So that's what core competencies are. And you can see that the reason we include accomplishments, one of the reasons why, is to really highlight those core competencies. What are the value added things that you offer a supervisor? So they're just basic qualities, they're transferable skills sometimes. You can see the core competencies that are required in a job by looking at the mission of the organization. Here's some core competencies for Texas Air National Guard. They have them on their website, and they say these are our Lone Star values. That's what they call them. Every agency is going to call them something different, but they put in here loyalty, opportunity, being networked, having ethics, having a selfless spirit, selfless service. Then they say the Texas spirit, which is courageous spirit of our people, history, and culture. Interesting. Adaptability and being ready. So those are some values that for this particular organization, they say are important. These are the core competencies identified by the Office of Personnel Management for federal employees. They want interpersonal effectiveness, customer service, having flexibility and adaptability, creative thinking, systems thinking, and organizational stewardship. So organizational stewardship is another way to write ethics, saying don't embarrass us, don't get a clown and a juggler and 18 tons of shrimp at your conference. Do the right thing. Organizational stewardship, I like that a lot. Caring about the organization. Customer service is a really hot one across government right now. Everybody wants customer service. Why? Why do we want customer service? Why is customer service? You tell me. Why is customer service so important to the federal government right now? Why are they so interested in people with more customer service? Anybody have any notions of why we would be interested in customer service? Anne mentions the image of the government worker. Yeah, I mean, there's just been some polls. People say, how's the government doing? What do you think about the government? People say terrible, awful, hate them. Because, most people interface with the government via the IRS. That's the most common way that people are interacting with the federal government. And you know, when it comes to customer service, they are not doing good. To improve the image of the federal government, absolutely. People want personalized service these days. Yes, I think that's true, that people really do. They want to be heard. We're very exhausted by the anonymity of the technology world, and so we really want more customer service. The government works for the people. Well, that's a great point. That's right. Who's paying the payroll over there at OPM? You and me. So we want some customer service in exchange for that. Government's under some pressure, yep, in an election year particularly. That's absolutely true. People skills are integral to the retention of customers and employees. Yeah, that's very, very true. So keeping people using their systems. So for the Office of Personnel Management, they manage USA Jobs. So being able to encourage people to use that service has an impact on the whole of the federal government, whether or not people are applying for jobs. So you can see it's really important to keep people happy. So would these core competencies be part of the job description, asks Angela. Yeah, sometimes they're included. The most common place that we see them in an announcement is at the very, very top of the announcement, where it sometimes describes an agency. And they'll say, well, the Department of the Navy is about X, Y, and Z. And a lot of people don't read that part of the announcement. It's the part where they sort of advertise the agency to applicants. And they're saying, like, come work for us. That's where you're going to find a lot of these core competencies. Sometimes we find the core competencies just by reading between the lines. So that's one of those things that you, as career experts, are going to get really, really good at. As you read an announcement, you're going to say, uh-oh, I'm looking at this announcement, and did you know that this is in an agency that's changing all the time? So Homeland Security, FEMA, TSA, anything in Homeland Security, they're pretty much going to have to be good at change and adaptability because it's a new agency. So some of it is just thinking it through. Some of it is looking for clues. Here's some descriptions of flexibility and adaptability. These are just different components of it. You could respond appropriately to new or changing situation, handle multiple inputs and tasks simultaneously, seeks and welcomes the idea of others. You know, as I read these, I think of people who I've encountered who don't have these skills. Works well with all levels and types of people. Oh man, there are some people who can only work with people like themselves. That's it, you know. I think the most famous folks for that are IT. Remember when the IT help desk image, the guys get so frustrated. They say, did you turn it off and turn it on? Well, did you try to reboot the system? Where they get really impatient, right? So there are some people who shouldn't have certain jobs. And these are one of the things that you're going to be doing in your job is talking with folks. And as you get to know your client and you look at their resume, you can think to yourself, well, should this person really apply for this customer service job? Because actually, they're not really that good with people. So it's good to just kind of think about it. So this is how we incorporate it into the resume. We kind of blend it in. You can see here. This is some hats from a resume. We have personnel management, customer service, and communications. So personnel management, it says direct kitchen and wait staff, promoting teamwork and communication, provide continual training and coaching to improve employee performance. Also serve as point of contact for benefit information, write position descriptions, resolve employee issues, provide employee feedback. So it's kind of subtle what we've done in there, and it's one of those things that's kind of like an icing on the cake type situation where if I've written somebody's resume, I might go back and say, can I tweak it to ensure that it looks like this person cares? So you see in here the team leader and interpersonal skills, and the way that we see that is that provide continual training and coaching. That's a really important key skill for people who are managing others. Is not just that they're writing position descriptions. Great, you know, super. We can get a computer to do that. What I want to know is how are you interacting with folks? So resolving employee issues. All of that stuff, what's going to happen basically is HR is going to read this and your resume is going to be scored. And sometimes they use numbers to score them. Sometimes they just essentially put the resumes in order. They kind of just rank them. But what happens is, as your resume, as these little paragraphs start to include more of these words and skills, your resume goes up in terms of the pile. So if you're applying up against somebody whose resume describes personal management and says hiring, firing, position descriptions, and security, their resume is going to be ranked lower than yours, because yours includes words like resolve or complex. Those words help boost the level of your resume. So this is what people always ask: how do I get my resume to the top of the pile? How do I get hired? And all of these things that I've told you are actually how we get people hired, is that we really take the word crafting very seriously. So in this case, customer service is its own competency, and we made it its own competency. Serve as personal and administrative assistant to First Family. Anticipate and respond to needs, maintaining flexible and service-oriented attitude. Purchase personal and business-related goods, including supplies, as extension of house staff. Assist in making schedule and making travel arrangements and appointment reservations as needed. Protect the privacy of the First Family and work with Maryland State Police to ensure security precautions are followed at all times. So this is a person who is working as an administrative assistant, and the way that we wrote it was customer service. So these days, nobody wants to see administrative assistant without seeing customer service. So we're thinking a little bit ahead here. And then the last one is communications. So represent First Family at charity and press events. That's a standard type thing in terms of communications, is representing others. But you see here at the top, it says build rapport with internal staff and external departments to improve operations and flow of information. So this isn't just basic communications, reading and writing. This is a little bit more subtle. So this is an advanced skill. Obviously, not everybody who comes to you is going to have a resume that's like this, but this is basically this is taking the resume to the next level, is including those core competencies. So while we're coming to an end here, let me just tell you some things that we don't want to see, okay? So all of our advice is based off of years in this business. So in addition to training, we provide services to individuals. We write resumes for people and help people get hired. This is words to avoid. These resume words are not going to help you. They're going to hurt you. Responsible for. Responsibilities include. You can just cross it right out of your resume. Duties include. Other additional duties include. We don't want to see any of that, because usually what we're going to see is at the end of that an actual word. So responsible for management of staff. Write staff manager or write manager of staff. You don't need to include responsibilities include. We're trying to cut out the junk words so that HR sees the highlighted words, the most important words. And when they see those most important words, it's going to make your resume go higher in the stack. And that's what we want. We want it to be at the top of the pile. Duties include helped with, worked with, assisted with, participate in. I mean, assisted with sometimes is the only word that you're going to be able to come up with for certain scenarios, but people tend to overuse it and they just have it for their whole resume. And at the end of the day, you're asking like, well, what are you doing there if you're just assisting with stuff or participating in stuff? What are you in charge of? Perform. People say that a lot. We like it for musicians. We don't like it for government. Prepare. That's great for chefs, not good for government. Serve as. Another one where you just don't need it. These are just kind of like words that mean nothing. So serve as, liaison to, whatever. So just cut it and make liaison to. This is the nuts and bolts of getting your resume higher. So the other thing that we want to avoid is passive voice. So here where it says serve as staff action officer, other duties include coordination, help in evaluating overall requirements, involved with justifying funding procedures. You see how people can make their resume, they basically just make their resume softer. So instead of saying help in evaluating overall requirements, just say evaluate overall requirements. We know that you don't work alone. everybody's helping, right? Everybody's helping except who? The president. Is he the only one that can use real verbs in his resume? We're all trying to just help, the American people and our president. So we really need to just take credit where we can. Everybody is part of a team. We know that. So say evaluate overall requirements with a team. Don't say help. Make recommendation and policy. Okay. You could just say recommend policy. Involved with justifying funding equipment requirements. Involved with? Yeah, it sounds like there was a scandal. Something happened. You were involved with that. Just cut these words out. They really aren't going to help your resume at all. So this is how we use the active voice: staff action officer, oversee establishment, manage. So you see each word, the start of each sentence is a keyword. See that? So that, because people aren't going to read the whole resume. Probably they're not going to read it word for word. Probably even the person that hires you will not read the resume word for word. Their eyes are just kind of reading it in a fast way. So that's why we start each sentence with a keyword. These are some powerful words that we would recommend: coach, inspire, lobby, rally, persuade, revitalize, unify, unite. Words that describe persuasion, quality, success, a level of excess, and a level of leadership. All of those words are going to help you avoid the silly words like assist and help with. So here's some suggestions. These are just some before and afters. Currently, I am working as the manager of operations. This is a very common starting sentence for somebody's resume. You can cut it down to manage operations. I have experience with planning meetings, plan and coordinate meetings. I have helped set up office systems. This is so tough for me because I understand that people are modest, but when it comes down to it, your resume is selling you. Your resume is telling you. You are not applying as a team. If you were applying as a team for these jobs, then I would say, yeah, say help, fine. But it's just you that's applying, so you really need to talk about who you are. So major duties included working with other staff, so you could just say cooperated with staff. That major duties include, remember, if somebody's not really reading every word of your resume, the point of that sentence, what you're saying there really is that you can work with other people well. So that's why we switched it to the word cooperated. Now I know this is a cooperative person. That's a quality that people very much like in federal employees, being able to cooperate with others. They're stuck with you, right? They hire you, they're stuck with you, so they want to know you can get along well. I used a variety of equipment. Equipment skills include. So these are just some very typical sentences that we see often in resumes, and it's pretty easy to, once you get an eye for it, to just kind of turn them around and take out the junk words. One question from Anne is, can unpaid work experience be used in core competencies? Yeah, so going back to core competencies for a second, absolutely your unpaid work experience can be used at any point in the federal hiring process. Unpaid work counts the same as paid work in the federal hiring process. So unpaid work counts the same as paid work in the federal hiring process. So if you had 3 unpaid internships that were 4 months each, that's okay. They equal 1 year of specialized experience. It's not the pay that matters. It's the level of complexity of the job, whether or not it would qualify you. But when it comes to core competencies where you're trying to hit those softer skills, I do see that quite a lot, that people use their, a lot of people have 2 careers, they have an A career and a B career, or even a C career where they're working in the federal government during the day and maybe they're playing the harp at night, or they're volunteering with their kids' Cub Scout thing at night. So you can start to hit some of those accomplishments. If you are a Cub Scout leader, you could throw a little bit in your resume about that. And it's great because it shows those interpersonal skills. You don't want to say too much if it is really for real a second career. If their unpaid work experience is them trying to get out of the federal government, you probably don't want to say that. I did actually have a harpist. I looked at a harpist resume recently, and she was a very serious harpist and probably spent, an additional 30 hours a week playing the harp. And I'm like, well, maybe you want to tone it down. You don't want your boss to think that you don't like your paid job. So yeah, we do use unpaid experience to highlight soft skills, but we don't go overboard. Here's some other suggestions. We'll just skip those for now. Beware of acronyms. Gosh, I'm sure you guys see this, the alphabet soup thing. I mean, it's taken me years and years, and I still, even in our conversation today, I'm using a few of them, right? I'm saying OPM, Office of Personnel Management. I talk about DoD, Department of Defense. So it's very easy to slip into this and to get comfortable in a world where other people speak your language. If you're applying outside of your agency, you're really going to need to spell out your acronyms and give a definition. This is a funny one, the wide area workflow. Well, that's an acronym that if I go to an agency, they'll say, oh, don't you know about the WAWF? The what? So you really want to make sure that you're spelling out those acronyms, because remember, HR is not an expert in what you do. They're an expert in HR. So if you're using job-specific acronyms, they're literally going to have no idea what you're talking about. Be consistent with verbs. So just present tense for jobs that you're in now, past tense for jobs that you were in. So present tense for current jobs, past tense for past jobs. I. We did have a question about this previously, so let's talk about I. We do use I, okay? We don't use it to start every sentence. We typically don't use it twice in the same sentences or two sentences in a row. When we use I, this is when we use I, when we use the first person, because I would say that 15 or 20 years ago, nobody ever used the word I. We are starting to see I make a comeback because it makes things make sense. So there's this whole movement in government towards plain language and just writing things that aren't as bureaucratic and make more sense to like a human person reading it. So it's not just like a robot reading it. So we do use I when it makes things make more sense. So the most common place we'll see that is in the accomplishment parts, or the part of the resume where we're talking about knowledge, skills, and abilities. So I led a team that, whatever. So we use it because it starts to sound weird to write a whole paragraph about something you did without using I. That's the main thing. We use it in a sentence that emphasizes complexity or uniqueness or something you did. So if you want to say, instead of like recipient of the Purple Heart, I received the Purple Heart. That's a great sentence to use the word I. It's about you and it's something you did. So I guess we're using I intelligently. We're not using I all the time. It's a little bit subtle. The thing that we basically just want to avoid is the folks who use I for every sentence. We're not doing that, nor are we taking I totally out, because without that I, a lot of times your resume can start to look robotic. So here's some examples. My division director ordered an audit to be conducted within 2 business days. And then it says, after getting input from other team members, I proposed a division of labor that made the challenge more manageable. We completed the audit a half day ahead of schedule, and the director awarded me a certificate of recognition for my contribution. This is just a story. This is an accomplishment. And the whole point of writing this story in this way is to show who you are as an individual. To complete an audit within 2 business days, I mean, that's something that's personal about you that we want to hear about you. So this story is a story. It's not a list of things. It would be very, very hard to tell that story without personal pronouns. Here's another one. After extensive research, I was able to convey to all personnel covering 7 different agencies the proper use of government vehicles within Europe. Status of forces agreement stipulates if a European country is not part of this, government vehicles can't be driven there. So we just have one I in there, and it makes the story more clear. A couple other points before we close here. I do recommend using the USA Resume Builder, and when we're together, we're going to be able to go online and check out that Resume Builder. People like to upload their resumes, and I can definitely say to you that uploading the resume isn't as successful usually as using the builder. The reason is because the builder asks you those required things, such as the month and year of employment, the start and end dates, contact information. So you're going to probably be more successful using the builder. Now, if you're helping somebody who is a veteran applicant and they are very, very skilled in using USA Jobs and writing federal resumes, and you trust yourself, you read it, it's got everything, then they can upload it. But if you're working with a beginner, I would really recommend that they use the builder in the resume in the USA Jobs. So you can have up to 5 resumes inside USA Jobs. So you could have one that's, if you have a couple of different focuses of your resume in terms of keywords, you could have one for IT specialist that's customer service, one for IT specialist that's, another focus. So that's all we have for now. We're gonna keep working on the resume when we meet together. One of the things that we ask people to do is to just try and keep their resume up to date over time. And obviously, it's easier to do that if you have one to begin with. So the best way to have somebody start on a resume if they've never done one before is to just say, make a list of your 5 hats. What are your hats? And then say, okay, give me 2 sentences about each of those hats. Boom. That's it. That's how you start writing the resume. Then you say, what are your accomplishments? That's it. So it's pretty simple starting with the hats. Does anybody have any questions? Here's a question. Does volunteer work have to be proven by someone else involved? Well, a lot of what's in our resumes is taken with a grain of salt. They ask for a supervisor's name and number at the bottom of your job duties and descriptions often, or they'll just at least have you put the address of the place where you worked, and it's implied that somebody's going to call and find out if you actually did it. Do they call every single person that you've ever worked for and find out that you actually worked there? No. So the question, Anne, is does volunteer work have to be proven? I mean, it would be best if it could be proven, but sometimes, they're not going to call. Sometimes they are going to call. If you're doing something that's independent to you, like you are helping in, I don't know, you're just tutoring kids or something in your free time, maybe you could have a parent listed as someone to verify it. But generally, I mean, all of this stuff in the resume is kind of like an ethics thing. They ask you to certify that it's true and that you didn't lie, and that's pretty much what they're going to ask you. Is the government starting to look at LinkedIn too? Recommendations are part of the social proof these days. Just curious. No, government, when it comes to the competitive jobs, are not looking at LinkedIn. So HR is really, really required to use the same standards of evaluation for every single applicant. That's why this whole process is like so standardized and meticulous and weird, honestly. But the thing is that it's supposed to be fair. So it wouldn't be fair to look at like one person's LinkedIn and another person, and the other person doesn't have LinkedIn. So they're not really looking at that. Are there any full-length examples of federal resumes you think are excellent that we can have access to? Yes, on our website there are a couple of samples of resumes, and then when we get together, we're going to give you a couple of copies of our books, which have tons and tons of samples. But in the meantime, you can look at our website, and we have some samples on there. And I can find a good one to send you guys as well in the meantime. When will we upload? Oh, we do have, actually, last week's is uploaded now to YouTube, and I will send you the link. Any other questions? It seems that most jobs we reviewed are lower to mid-level. Any recommendation for director and above levels? In this, the rules are precisely the same at every GS level. So unless you're applying for the senior executive service, which is a whole other set of rules, the rules in terms of keywords and accomplishments are exactly the same for every grade level, because basically HR follows the same rules. They are basically just reading the job description and then looking at the resume on 2 different screens. So that basically the rules are the same. Okay. Couple other questions here. Where do you put unpaid work? In the work history? Yep. And what do you list as salary and number of hours worked per week? So you can just put unpaid work in the work history, just like a job. It is a job. Unpaid work is work. So you can put it in the work history, and you don't have to put your salary, and you put hours per week. You can just estimate. You can also put unpaid work in the additional information part at the bottom of a resume if you want, and that works too. Okay. Looks like we're out of questions here. Let me just take one more. Let me just take a couple more looks here. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, great. Well, it looks like we're out of questions for the moment, but we will have time to answer more questions as we spend more time together. You can always email me. My email was at the top of the PowerPoint in the second slide if you have follow-up questions. And let me send you the copy of the resume that we have on our website. I'll just email that out to you real quick so that you have a full-length resume. And this one will be posted to YouTube. It takes, it'll probably be a few hours at least because we need to convert these files can be kind of complicated to convert. So we'll do that and then we'll post it to YouTube this afternoon. Okay, great. I'm glad you guys had a good session. I know it's a lot of information, a lot of very technical information, but that's it. That's how it works. I mean, if you want to know how we do what we do, that's the down and dirty on it. So we gave you the insider information about how we create the outline format, the hats, the accomplishment, the keywords. The whole thing is in there. So you can take your time and take a look at it again as you're working with folks. Thank you so much. I'm glad you appreciated the presentation. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. We'll talk soon, and let me know if you have any additional questions. Thanks so much.